Great. I think a few people are still trickling in. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the information webinar for the SHRF Align grant. I'm Karen Tilsley. I'm Director of Programs and Partnerships at SHRF. And just want to take a moment before we get started just to think about where we are. I'm speaking from Treaty 6 lands in Saskatoon. Came into the office today in Innovation Place. It's such a beautiful setting. Really should come in more often. And hopefully we have people from all around the province. So let's just take a moment to reflect about the lands that we're on. Okay, I have both a chat box and a question and answer box open. So if you're having any troubles or have any questions, feel free to use either the chat or the question and answer. If you type in a question, other people won't see it unless I answer it publicly. Okay. So I'll just give a really quick background about SHRF. So we are provincial agency. We're funded through the government through Innovation Saskatchewan, and we fund, support, and promote the impact of health research that matters to Saskatchewan. And we have three overarching strategic goals. So the first being to strengthen research capacity and competitiveness, to increase investment in research and innovation, and to align research with stakeholder needs. So we don't have specific research focus areas set out. We really set up a strategy to be responsive to what's happening around us. For example, when COVID began years ago now, we were able to pivot quickly and respond to those pressing needs. So we think that that is an asset to be flexible in that way. So building on these three strategic goals in the research funding program area, we have developed 4 sort of umbrella programs. And you'll start to see us talk about it in this way more. We did kind of a refresh a couple years ago, but it's really an ongoing process. So thinking in these larger buckets, we have a capacity program, and currently that involves the establishment grant that everyone is, I'm sure, very familiar with. The solutions program, which we're just getting ready to formally launch and announce the focus areas last week on our website, if you want to check those out. So that has 2 funding opportunities, the innovation grant and the impact grant. I'll just touch on partnership programs. So we also work with other funders that have peer review processes set out and where we can really maximize our resources. And within those partnerships, we're also thinking about capacity and solutions and connections under those partnerships as well. So today, this new Align grant that I'm speaking about is under the Connections program that meets our strategic goals. So you probably have heard of the SHRF Research Connections grant. It's been around for a while. It's evolved somewhat over the years, and you'll see some more evolution in the coming year as we have this new grant, the Align grant, and then evolve more of the branding around Research Connections grant and maybe some of the processes to really meet our goals there. And I should have mentioned that, and I think you would have been warned that this session is being recorded. Right now I'm the only one that can talk, so that's probably fine with everyone. If you ask questions, then they might show up as well. So the Align grant, so it's a new grant we're offering. You might have heard of the START award that we had last year. So this grant really builds on some of the ideas we were testing with that grant and really expands the scope of what we're doing and eligibility. So yeah, so I'll take you through a lot of the things that are in the application package, in the program guidelines. Hopefully give you some more context about what we're looking for, maybe spark some questions. I anticipate there'll be questions that I maybe can't answer today, and so if they're just because this is a new opportunity, And so if there's anything that I need to circle back on, then we can post those along with the video on our website for everyone to see. So yeah, the recording of this webinar will be posted on the SHRF website through our YouTube channel. So the purpose of the grant, as stated, is to enable a diverse and connected research community in Saskatchewan that's well positioned to receive peer-reviewed funding and conduct impactful research aligned with Saskatchewan needs. So there's a lot to unpack there. So when we use the word diverse, we're really talking about the different perspectives that people bring to the research process. And we know that research really benefits from having those perspectives throughout the process. Yeah, so we'll really break this down when we go through the objectives of the program. And I think it's pretty evident when we're talking about aligned with Saskatchewan needs that we're really building on our strategic goals there. Just to take a moment to touch on what we mean when we talk about stakeholders. It's kind of the word that we've been using to just as a really all-encompassing term. It could be everything from individuals like patients, could be policymakers, we could be talking about certain groups of citizens, or you could be working with stakeholder organizations, community-based organizations, people in the health system, charities, it could be industry as a stakeholder. So there's really a really broad definition there. And with this grant, we really hope to see more of those connections all the way through the process and early on to really help shape the research. So to break down the three objectives for this grant, we are looking to first increase research relevance, coordination, and potential for impact. So we see two main ways in this happening. So the first being enabling the development and engagement of robust interdisciplinary research teams that include stakeholders. And the second being a bit more of an open-ended statement around completing activities that shape research to align with Saskatchewan context and respond to Saskatchewan needs. So I'll go through some examples later in the presentation of what we did our best to imagine might be under this category of activities. I'm sure there's things that we have not thought of and that we're open to considering that still fit with the objectives of the grant. So the second is to increase the quality and success of Saskatchewan applications to peer-reviewed funding competitions. So by including stakeholders early and getting the research situated in the Saskatchewan context, we think that that will increase the funding that's available to continue Saskatchewan projects and really increase the quality of those applications. And what we're looking for, being a provincial funder, we're allowing this to be used for applications to our own programs, such as the Solutions Program or the Establishment Grant Program, but not for other provincial funding, just because we're really looking for a return on our investment as one of the key impact metrics for our organization. So beyond our funding, we're looking for peer-reviewed funding that happens. There might be a Western Canadian opportunity, for example. Otherwise, there's national competitions. It could be international competitions. If you have a competition in mind and you're unsure, it's easy enough just to send me the link to the details, and I'm sure I'll be able to give you an answer on that, whether it's eligible for this program. So the third objective we have is linking back to our goal to increase capacity, and we really want to use this opportunity to support trainees, and that can be really broad definition, sort of your traditional research assistant to community-based research assistants to health residents, people doing health professional training. So we just really want to, we think this is a great opportunity to get those people involved and perhaps use some of the budget to pay them to do those things. So that is something that we've made mandatory for this application. And that means having an actual person named on the application. So the grant is for up to $10,000 for 1 year. And we expect that you use that money very responsibly. We are funded through taxpayer money, so that's very important. And the request should be in balance with the scope of what you're proposing. We do not expect that everyone is going to need $10,000. $10,000 is the max we have for this year. But if you, for example, if you need a research assistant to do some work and a bit of travel, and it's really a couple of months of work that's happening, and that budget adds up to maybe $2,000, then that's how much you should ask for. If you try to go over, that could really hurt you in the application process. And I'll get into the next slide. We're running 3 intakes this year. So wanted to just give an example, if you are doing, so you're allowed as a principal applicant to have 1 application per call, but you could also submit to the next call. So if you maybe asked for $1,000 and were successful and you did some work and then realized, okay, now we have more work that we need to do before we move forward, then you could ask for another $1,000 to continue that work in working towards that peer-reviewed funding application. So to put it simplistically, you have 1 year to use the Align grant and another year following that to submit a peer-reviewed grant application. But of course, I know that's not exactly how it's going to play out. It's going to be much more complex than that. So, but just to give you a sense, there's that 1 year for the grant and then another year allowed for applying to the subsequent grant. So I've got the 3 call deadlines up here. So we have one right away on July 14th, a deadline. So the call is open right now. And we realize this is a really quick turnaround. If there's just anyone waiting in the wings that has something ready, then we wanted to be able to get that funding out the door for them. And we just need a few weeks to respond to you. So when the deadline is July 14th, it's 4:30 p.m. that day. And this would require that your institution sign off as well, according to their policies. So you will probably have to give them a few extra days before the SHRF deadline. So the second call, the deadline is August 18th. And we're hoping that will be optimal for some people applying to the SHRF Solutions program to have some funding to get going there. But as I said before, it could be to a variety of different funding applications over the next couple of years that you're working towards. And we set up that with the hope that it lines up well with a student. Perhaps it is working during the fall term. And then the third call with a deadline of December 6th, we're hoping that sets it up so that a student that's involved would have the spring term, starting in the spring term. So we're just trying to keep that in mind about making it easy for trainees to be involved with this. Since one of the objectives is to apply for peer-reviewed funding, we have set the requirements for the principal investigator to be the ones outlined in our funding guide, where you're autonomous in your research activities. So trainees can't be the principal applicant. Contracted employees can't be principal applicants. So you have the ability to hold peer-reviewed funding at an eligible institution, and that you're in Saskatchewan for the term of the grant. Yeah, okay, I see one question. I think I'll loop back to that later. So we've just got the institutions the images here of the institutions that currently have a memorandum of understanding with SHRF. So if you have a position with one of those that allows you to hold peer review research funding and conduct autonomous research, then you would be eligible to be a principal applicant. And if there's ever any questions about eligibility, just let us know. So with all of our programs, we use 3 different terms to talk about the people that are involved in the proposed activities. So the applicants are the ones that are involved in really the thinking, planning, doing of the project. And they could be researchers, knowledge users, or persons with living experience. So those are different perspectives that we've grouped people in for the sake of applying to all of our grants. This is the same way we categorize people. And the second group is personnel, and that's really to separate out people that are being compensated from the grant funds, so staff, trainees, for example. And so the requirement to have a trainee involved, they could be in either of those roles. They could be an applicant. If you do want to compensate them from the grant funds, though, they would be listed as personnel. And then supporters, some organizations use the term collaborators. We found that word was used in so many different ways. We went with supporters. These are the people or organizations that would write letters of support. They are maybe assisting in the feasibility, carrying out certain parts of your project, or they have an interest in the outcomes and they're really expressing their support overall. So the requirements for the actual application to SHRF, we're not requiring that you have those stakeholders outside of academia on our SHRF grant, because we're hoping that you might need this funding in order to do that, or we're thinking that you might need our funding in order to do that. So I think people are going to come to this with many different, they might just be starting to build relationships. Maybe they just moved to the province. Maybe they're expanding into a new area of research that they need to build some new connections. Or maybe this is about maintaining connections, doing activities with those stakeholders that maintain those relationships, that inform future research. So it doesn't have to be that you've never met these people before. It's just that you have to be able to be connecting with stakeholders outside academia at some point during the proposed activities, but they don't need to be applicants on the grant necessarily. And as I've mentioned, there must be one trainee either as an applicant or personnel. And yeah, if you worked together previously, that doesn't exclude you. You can still apply. But I would expect that if you're expanding into something new, that there might be some considerations of new people or groups that or engagement that needs to happen that sort of grows your research. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So kind of this gives a bit of an overview, the application requirements. So we're looking for you to address all 3 of the aligned grant objectives. We expect that you have a clear plan, timeline, and deliverables. So when we're reading it, we get it. This is what you're going to do. This is who's going to do it. This is why. So everyone that's listed has clear roles and responsibilities. And that I really want to highlight this one again, that at some point in the application, there is connection and interaction with individuals outside academia. So this grant isn't to support activities that never leave your office or your lab. It could include components of those, but really that work should then be taken outside of your office or lab to help shape future research. Again, employing one trainee in a meaningful way or involving them on the team. And only requesting funding for the proposed activities. So the budget should really line up nicely with the proposed activities. and not include funding covered by other sources. So not include activities covered by other funding sources. I think that's pretty standard thing to keep in mind, not asking for overlapping funding. And then you need to identify at least one eligible, so Western Canadian, national, international peer-reviewed funding application to be submitted within 2 years of the Align Grant start date. Some of the allowable expense considerations. It's always a good idea to have a look at our funding guide on our website for those overarching policies. Things like our funding needs to be spent in Saskatchewan, things like that are applied to all our programs. But specifically to this program, we wanted to highlight that that expenses can cover limited research activities. So you might be seeking ethics as part of this proposed activities. So that can be part of your application. And, you know, things like a research allowance or honoraria, providing nourishment and engaging with people outside of academia. We can't, unfortunately, fund, you know, team inside your office kind of team meeting food. But, you know, for the purposes of engaging outside of academia, that is allowable. And then things to keep in mind that are not allowable, equipment, you know, I think it's a small grant. This is really to fund the activities. We're not looking to fund, you know, publication costs, conference presentations, travel to conference, anything like that. And this might be a little bit confusing, but we can't fund the activities for the express purpose of preparing the future grant proposal. So this grant can't be used to pay someone to actually write the grant. It's about the work that helps frame the grant, frame the questions, the approach, those kinds of things. And yeah, again, there's some overarching policies in our funding guide. It's good to check back there as well. So this is not an exhaustive list of eligible activities. This was the best we could do with our imagination and our experience, and we expect that you will be much more creative than we are. Again, this is the first year of the grant, so you know, if you're not sure if it fits, you know, loop back to the objectives, the application requirements, and then let us know if you have any questions. So some of the things we came up with for examples, just to sort of illustrate what we thought this could be used for, generally like a community needs assessment, determining the scope or scale of a health issue in Saskatchewan. So is this actually an important issue in Saskatchewan? You know, if you're wanting to run a clinical trial, for example, do you have enough eligible participants to power a clinical trial? That could be one example. So I expect everyone's power calculations, if that's relevant to you, will be very well informed. I know that's something reviewers always pick up on in applications with that kind of analysis. Just a bit of a sidebar there. So another thing, it could be determining next steps and needs as you're moving along from perhaps piloting an idea to trying to implement it, anywhere along that pipeline, so to speak, was sort of determining what is needed next. We're also hoping that you're able to coordinate with initiatives that are already underway in Saskatchewan. So we're a small province. Hopefully we can work together, not duplicate work that's already happening. Maybe use this to reach out to, you know, groups and set up a structure where you can keep each other informed and really identify opportunities for future research that that sort of cross different groups that maybe haven't talked to each other before. And then once you do, you think, why have we never talked to each other before? So connecting with Saskatchewan stakeholders, that's, you know, pretty generic. Co-developing research questions being a part of that. Undertaking culturally appropriate engagement and relationship building. We know that's very important, and that's definitely eligible for this grant. Identifying outcomes important to stakeholders, so that could take different forms. That could be through relationship building, or it could be other mechanisms. Answering feasibility questions related to the Saskatchewan context, and identifying those knowledge sharing avenues outside academia. So, who is interested in my team's research? Where can I go with this? And trying to get those avenues set out early on. And I think that will really strengthen your application, especially to national funders. That's, something you're definitely going to need in applying nationally. Just a couple more slides here. So the application and review process, being the first year, we didn't want to invest in putting it in the RMS while we are trying it out, so to speak. We have set this up to be outside of the RMS this year. There's 3 SHRF forms. That's the next slide. I'll wait to talk about that. So it's through email submission this year. And as we look at how the calls this year went, and as we revamp that connections program, branding and process overall, we'll be moving it into the RMS like all of our other programs. So have a look at the application package and then our funding guide, which applies to all of our programs. This grant will be internally reviewed this year at SHRF, and we're looking at a lot of, have they met the grant objectives? Is the application clear? Are all the requirements met? So that's the kind of thing we're looking for when we're reviewing it, and that process may evolve after this year, but this year it's an internal process. I did want to say that really encourage you to ask questions before the submission. Once we review it internally, there won't be an opportunity to submit or go back and forth. We will ask you to submit the next call if there's, for example, even if it's something like your budget that's unclear, doesn't line up with the scope of the activities, then that could hurt the ability of your application to pass that review process. So if you have any questions, ask them before you submit. And if you get feedback from us on where there was perhaps requirements that were not met or unclear, then you can ask us questions, of course, and revise and submit to the next call. So a complete application, we've got a checklist in the form just to kind of help you, because it's not that online system that checks for you. So there's 3 different forms from SHRF. There's the application form and then 2 Excel files. So one where you put in the information about the future funding opportunity or opportunities if you have more than one, and one where you put in your budget, which is similar to what you would do on the RMS anyways, but we're just doing it outside. And then there's attachments that you will prepare in PDF and send to us. So you have a proposal that is a maximum of 3 pages, a timeline on a 1-page setting. You have 2 pages to talk about all the different people and their roles and responsibilities. If you have any letters of support, include those as a PDF, and any budget documentation. So if you have some type of service or anything that you might need a quote, for example, you want to include that so we have a good sense of why the budget is what it is. And there's no CVs required for this application. So hopefully that really streamlines the ability to pull this together in a timely manner and to involve different people. Question about attachments. Can you add appendices with reference, project materials, etc.? Good question. I think if it's really, really important, you could include that, but just remember it's the SHRF staff looking at this. So if it really helps us understand um, what you're doing and you couldn't explain it in the proposal, that will be fine, but really we'd prefer that in the proposal you're able to show us everything that you're doing. We're not in a position to judge whether your data collection materials are scientifically good, so we're not going to be judging that anyways. But if you think it really helps add clarity, I think that would be fine. This is probably one that I'll formalize my answer and post along with this video. Someone asked if you want all the documents collated into one PDF or separate, whatever is easiest. I know that some people have, like Adobe Pro, for example, that makes it really easy to put it all in one PDF, and that's probably easier for you too. If you don't, that's fine. We'll manage. We'll just do it at our end, probably. Yeah. Just checking the question box here. So yeah, just some tips for applying. So just read through that application package. You don't have to have your whole research team set out. It can be helpful to show that you have the supports in place to be able to do the things that you're proposing. Yeah, think through your budget. That's something that we are able to judge as research administrators, whether your budget is reasonable. So that's definitely something we're able to look at, make sure it reflects the proposal. And think about that target funding application that as a requirement, and be really clear and precise as you write out your plan and deliverables. When we read it, we want to be able to envision what you're planning to do, how, why. All right, I think that was my last slide. So yeah, so I'm the contact, the program manager, so to speak, for this one. Of course, with the help of my team, Chelsea Cunningham and Danny Robertson Boersma, and Tanya Scorbahatch, whose name is also up here. So Tanya can help you with anything related to the application forms. Of course, if this was in the RMS, she would be your person, but in this case, it's the forms. So yeah, Tanya is really helpful with that kind of thing. And yeah, that's all I have for my slides. So I'll move over to the question and answer and chat here. So someone asked if your application is not successful, you can apply for the next round. Absolutely. So you're allowed one application as the principal investigator per call. We have 3 calls set out for this year. So if you're not successful in the first one, absolutely apply to the second one. If you're not successful, apply to the third one and take our feedback, hopefully. All right. No, there's no separate budget justification. Someone's asking if there's a budget justification separate from the 3-page proposal. No, we just want this to be pretty straightforward. So the justification is woven right within the proposal. I have a question about how many grants will be awarded each round. So we have, our budget is for the Connections program overall. So we have some flexibility. I don't suspect that we're going to run out of funding on the first call or anything like that. If we did, I'll be shocked and I'll eat my words, I guess. I suspect that we'll be, yeah, first time offering. I don't know what the demand will be. I've been wrong before. Yeah, we have a healthy budget to award grants. So yeah, I think all I can say for that one. We don't have a specific number for each round. So if we got no applications the first call, that money is still available for the second and third calls. Okay, I'll go back to a question we got earlier. So regarding one application per PI per call, does each application need to focus on a different topic, or can these applications potentially build on each other? Yeah, I think that will happen naturally, that the one thing sticking in my mind is that there is that requirement to apply for peer-reviewed funding. So that might be one that we're navigating a bit as we go this year, seeing how people are using the funding, and if they ask for funding through one call for kind of phase one, and then they need more funding for phase two. But really, phase one and phase two are all working towards the same peer-reviewed funding opportunity. I think that's feasible. There'll probably be some back and forth this time if that becomes an issue, I guess. So yeah, if you can just sort of be patient along with us as we navigate this. We want to support you within the objectives, requirements, eligibility. So that is our goal, but we might be navigating some new territory. All right. Oh, another question about budget justification. So I think I answered that one. So yeah, justification just woven throughout the proposal. Right. So I'm not seeing any new questions pop up. If I didn't answer yours, maybe let me know. Yeah, this recording will be posted on our website, and I'll take a look back through these questions and see if there's anything I need to clarify more widely. I think honestly a lot of it is going to be contacting us to talk about what you're thinking about, and we can work through that together. Okay, I'll just wait another 30 seconds here to see if anyone has any last questions. Otherwise, yeah, I really thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we're really looking forward to seeing what the research community comes up with, and what kind of greater impact we can have by supporting these kind of activities. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so the recording will be posted on the SHRF website under opportunities on the Align Grant webpage. There will be a very obvious link to this recording. It'll probably take us a day or two just to process it and get it up there. And then you can let your colleagues know to check it out. All right, looks like questions have slowed down. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining, and I hope you have a great long weekend ahead. Okay, thanks everyone.